Welcome to the NetCetera podcast. I'm your host, Blake Minho Kim. Join me as we focus on demystifying the innovations driving the new internet. All right. Welcome, Zach. How you doing today?
Doing great, Blake. It's good to see you, man.
Yeah, great to see you again. It's been too long. Need to get back to New York, but glad we can chat here, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in Denver very soon. So
yeah,
that'll
man.
be fun. It'll be good. Well, let's dive straight into it. As we always do on NetCetera, we love to start with an origin story. So let's start there. If you could tell me and our audience a bit about yourself, Coinage, and very much, how'd you get to this point and where you are today with Coinage? And let's start there.
Yeah, so Coinage is, one of the fastest growing new Web3 media outlets. And it's essentially founded on the idea of decentralization and co-ownership, right? And so we launched with this model of letting our viewers basically transition from just being passive subscribers and watchers of our content to being co-owners of our content. So it's a DAO, it's a co-op, it's everything that I think Web3 is supposed to be. It's a fun experiment of a way to cover the space, but let our viewers basically steer the ship in how we cover it. And that's basically Coinage in a nutshell.
There we go. But I also want to know about Zach, right? So I want to hear your journey. So tell us a bit more about yourself, actually, before we even go too deep into Coinage. I want to hear about, how'd you even get to this point? How'd you get to this idea? Because I always think the backstory is really important and it helps give people context on how you even got to this. And I think actually from what I know, it adds a lot of really interesting flavor.
Yeah. I mean, my background is in being an anchor at Yahoo Finance and CNBC. So I come from the traditional media world. And obviously media right now is going through a bit of a tough time. The model's a bit broken.
I want to dive into that later on. So just get ready. Yeah.
Yeah. So, my background's coming from that world and, seeing a lot of the problems in which, not just crypto media, honestly, but just media in general. There are no shortage of problems in the industry. And, I covered crypto for a long time, basically been interested in Bitcoin since 2014. And the deeper and deeper I went, the more I got jealous of everybody else who was building and realized that, wait a minute, NFTs could be used to maybe solve some of media's problems. And in 2022, quit, gave up my cushy anchor job at Yahoo, great team, left it behind and said, I think we can use NFTs. I think we can use memberships here and the network effects that come from Web3 to fix media's problems and create a better path forward for creators. And basically that's how Coinage was born. That's my evolution from traditional media into Web3 media. It's been pretty fascinating to learn how these tools are being used.
We love that. And that's, I think, really just, I want to share that with the world, right? Because I think understanding that, you do have that pedigree and you do have that context, I think is really important because I think, looking around the space, just from my perspective, I think there are very few people like yourself who I think have that understanding of, just the challenges that I think, we face within crypto and media as a whole. So it's a beautiful thing. So building off of that, right? So now going back to Coinage, right? So you were talking about Coinage, decentralized media, co-ownership with the community. We'd love to dive a bit, let's do the double click, as they say in tech, right? Let's learn more about it. So how does it work? How's the community get involved? And how's that journey been for you so far?
Yeah, when we first started, I wanted to create something that would let people actually co-own something, right? We talk about NFTs. A lot of people think they're just collectibles. And I think, probably a wide swath, if you stop someone on the street and said, what's an NFT? They would probably say a PFP, and that's kind of what most people know them as. But for where we sat, we always looked at the technology as a way to actually have ownership in something, right? And so we went the co-op model because it allows us to pay dividends back to members, right? Co-op model has been around for a really long time. All we're doing is really putting the co-op model on chain. And so I think, the Coinage model is very much built around co-ownership and the idea of people steering what we're doing and unlocking a lot of the network effects. And honestly, Blake, it came from the problems that I had in Web2 media in trying to cover crypto. It's basically impossible. No one knows what the hell's going on. You can't be an expert in everything. So what's a good way to tackle that problem is create a community of a bunch of really smart people who have differing interests and let them kind of chase what they think is the big story. And crypto moves so fast that it's anyone's guess to be like, hey, we should cover this, or no, you should cover that.
Yep.
It's really leaning into the idea of a decentralized newsroom, so to speak, and letting people pitch all kinds of stories, get better guests. And that's kind of where the idea came from. Is there a better way to cover this industry? Because it's so unique that it's actually been really cool to kind of open it up and let everyone own a piece of what we do.
And what a fun time. And I guess I don't know if I need to make a disclosure or not, but I am also a Coinage Caucus
right.
NFT holder.
Yes.
Because I do believe strongly in this mission and what you guys are building. So very excited and love being a part of this cooperative. So building on top of that, right? So Coinage as fundamentally, I guess, like it is media, it's news. Let's talk about the news a little bit. So I think in terms of the stories and the articles, I mean, you have some great video content, some great articles, an awesome newsletter. Would love to kind of just hear straight from you, like, how has that journey been covering this industry maybe over the past couple of years and getting that community involvement in? How does that work? Are they making pitches and what have been maybe, I guess, some bigger highlights for you over the past couple of years as we've been going through these crazy times?
Yeah, it has been crazy. I mean, if you think about where Coinage started, the first piece of content we put out did 2 million views. It was the Do Kwon interview after Terra collapsed. We were the first one to chat with him. And, that blew up and it kind of put Coinage on the map. And since then, there have been other collapses to cover as well. And, we covered SBF's trial and I went out to his house and chatted with him before the trial and we reported on that. And, it's probably the worst time to ever start a crypto media publication, to be honest with you. But people like watching a train wreck. So actually for viewership, it's kind of counter-cyclical in that sense. But in general, I mean, I think the space moves so quick and now it's exciting to see, again, kind of being a project that is very much in the arena as well, right? It kind of gives us an edge in the sense that I'm seeing things as a Web3 founder in seeing how the technology is used, having these conversations with these companies kind of behind closed doors because we're also in the space, right? Like we got to use the tech to make it all work and we're making decisions on which chain should this live on and how does it work and, what's legal. And so it's all pretty interesting to kind of, be in the space now. But in general, I think, so much has evolved since when we started, right? Now it's kind of the excitement around trying to understand new projects, whereas before it was all backwards looking to how did this really collapse? So it's exciting to see that kind of pivot. I think a lot of people who have been in the space long enough are exciting to see us turning a corner there now. But it's a really competitive time, man. I mean, I think, so many people are in the crypto media space now, and there are a lot of really good publications, a lot of really good journalists in the space. For Coinage, though, I think it's more of a cultural play so much, right? If you're leaning on a community, everyone's got a take, everyone's got experiences. And it's been, again, really cool to kind of see the network effects open now where any NFT holder can say, hey, you should cover this or you should have this guest on and pitch these things. You're in the Discord too. You disclosed you're a Coinage NFT holder. Like these ideas are being crowdsourced in that way. And like I said, no one knows the right answer to any of these things. So it's been really fun to see, debates happen and our NFT holders kind of, shill to their heart's content. But eventually we reach consensus. And that's kind of, what Coinage is all about.
We love that. We love that. And yes, the Discord is fun, and I enjoy participating in those conversations. And that actually leads me to the next thing that I'd love to chat about, which is, as a community, I think some of my favorite kind of community events I think you guys have hosted. So we'd love to hear a bit more about some of those activations that you guys have done. I think like there was a scavenger hunt and the most recent thing with the brackets, right? So
yeah, I think the whole idea of putting a show on chain is pretty interesting, right? Because we all know the Oprah example of like you go to Oprah and you check under your seat and you get a car. And like, when you're building a show or building an outlet on chain, you have a very intimate relationship with your viewers because you have their wallets and you can do things like we've done Crypto Project of the Year, which was a really cool activation where we basically designed a March Madness bracket and had a bunch of founders on and they debated which one was the best project to wrap up the year and our NFT holders voted. And that was a really cool way to reach consensus. You mentioned the scavenger hunt. That was kind of a cool way to highlight all of our stories and content and let people come together in our community to solve puzzles. We played on-chain trivia, which is another thing that you came out to the studio for out here in Brooklyn. You know, it's all kinds of different things that you can do when you're building on-chain and have that kind of relationship. And I think increasingly we're kind of already seeing it with the way that Twitter's monetizing content that you put on their platform. Like this idea of content and rewards and money all kind of blending together, because attention at the end of the day is the, I guess, thing that we're all chasing on the internet, right? And whether it's advertising dollars or anything else. So it's just kind of interesting to now think about what can you do when you put content on chain, and what can you do when you put community at the forefront of that. And, you know, Coinage is just our first show in what we're trying to do in the Web3 media space. Like our company, Trustless Media, is working on a bunch of different concepts that will be taking the Coinage model, because I really do think that that's the big opportunity. I mean, crypto media is kind of a niche subset of media, but if you apply the same kind of Web3 tools, like I said, once you have this living on chain, voting mechanisms, dividends, like all this stuff can be pretty much replicated across not just crypto media, but everywhere else. And so I think that that's kind of the bigger picture, cool piece of what Web3 media unlocks.
I'm really excited about. You gave me some hints. I don't know how much you want to talk about it here. You can give some, you know, but hold off on that for a second, because I think what I would love to dive a bit into as well is better understanding, I guess, your viewpoint on, and this kind of ties into bigger picture stuff as well, but thinking more specifically about monetization, business models, revenue streams, right? Because I think you're right when we talk about content and attention. Attention is more fragmented than ever. Content is more plentiful than ever. So how do you think about, you know, I mean, this is a big question, I guess, now I think about it, but future of media and how you can monetize more effectively, I guess, with the community and on-chain and all that.
Yeah. Let me share some alpha for you here, Blake. Let me share some of the big things, because I think you're right. I mean, like the reason why Web2 media models are breaking down right now in this era of the internet is because they basically have done a very bad job of extracting the value of their content. It's just, you know, ads are a terrible way to monetize content. I think it creates a worse product. Who wants to watch these ads when all they want to do is watch the content? And why would you kind of, as you know, as a journalist, why would you kind of try and set something up to monetize trust by using an ad? It's just, it makes for a worse experience overall. And so, you know, with Web3 media, I think it solves an issue in terms of different ways to monetize. And, you know, our NFTs are subscriptions to content, so maybe that's not all that revolutionary, but there are other things you can do. And, you know, specifically for Coinage, we just announced this, but we're actually partnering with a validator to roll out our own validator. So our viewers can now stake with us, and those rewards go back to the Coinage DAO. So instead of maybe going to, you know, $1 billion centralized company and staking with them, you can actually start to create incentives from your viewers to stake with the outlet, and, you know, create this win-win where you get rewards and also the other, like the commissions, go back to the Coinage DAO. So I think it's a really cool way to monetize some of, you know, again, the network effects of what we're building, but also just create a more intimate relationship with someone who may just consume your content and really want to support it in a different way. I think that's really cool. And I also feel like, again, creating community around these brands, I think we've seen it. Keith Grossman's one of our advisors, and what he did with timepieces, I think, was kind of a revolutionary idea of how do you create community as a media brand. And that, I think, is the secret sauce, is kind of what a media brand is. It's always been looked at as just a content play. But I think increasingly in the era of Web3, people are realizing like there's more than just click this article, make some ad money off of reading it. There's all kinds of things that are happening now, which is really exciting.
Yes, and that makes so much sense. And actually, that's it. Yeah, that is an alpha alert. I actually didn't. I think I had missed that. It's been a busy week.
We haven't announced it yet. That's the thing. Is I'm telling you, you're the first to know.
Yes, I'm excited. All right, and then we'll coordinate on publish time and all that. But yes, I'm excited, and that's gonna be fun. Really pumped. Is that on ETH mainnet or?
So we're partnering with Dike is the name of the company, and they run more than 30 chains. So it's basically stake with any of those validators on those chains. And
yeah, there we go. That's a very crypto native approach, and I love that. Um, would love to actually. Well, you just mentioned, right, branching out beyond even crypto and thinking about other industries and other places. Um, I guess reflecting on that, right? Thinking about watches and culture. So I myself am I love menswear. I'm in a couple actually like paid. Um, well, I mean, I'll just say it right. It's kind of weird, but it's a podcast called Blamo, which I guess, now shilling on my own podcast. Um, but Jeremy Kirkland, he's the host of Blamo, really great menswear guy. He's been in the scene for a long time. He has a paid Slack community called Blamo. It is interesting though, because when I'm in that Slack, it's all about menswear, obviously. So clothes and culture and watches specifically, which is why it sparked this thought. However, what's funny is there is a tech section, and in that tech section, every now and then, people are pretty disparaging about crypto and Web3. So I guess from my vantage point, it is always challenging this giant chasm that still seems to exist between, what we call Web3 and crypto and the rest of the world. So curious to get your take on, as you start to think about expanding the Trustless Media brand outside of Coinage. How do you think you're going to be able to pull it off successfully, I guess, when you're leveraging this technology that has such a somewhat of a stigma still today?
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And I think it's one of those things to where a lot of the industry is debated, should we kill the word NFT? I think we definitely should. I think that, a lot of people hear that and immediately wince or just back away or just shut down as soon as you say NFT. And I think, there's probably good reason for that, right? Can we really say that we trust a lot of the things that we've seen around NFTs all the time? Like, there's a lot of bad things associated with it. So, like, I get it. But to your point on how do you, like, cross that bridge, I think it's gotten to a point in the industry where, like, abstracting these things away to where people don't even realize that it is an NFT is kind of the coolest piece of this. So we're actually working on our second show right now. It's called Best Dish Ever. It's in the food space. It has nothing to do with crypto. And we're working with content creators in the food space, and we're working with Privy, because Privy basically abstracts away the whole idea of even needing a wallet. So you just go in, you sign up, you use an email, you buy a membership pass with a credit card. You don't even know that it's an NFT, but it's there. And you can sell it if you want to, and it can unlock all these perks. And so, like, we've arrived at a weird point in the industry's evolution, because do you want to put it on the back end? Does that really, at the end of the day, drive the tech forward? And I think the answer is, like, it's up to these businesses. It's up to these entrepreneurs who think, there is value in doing so, but maybe the customer doesn't need to know. And I think that that's kind of the way that almost any technology has evolved. If you look at the internet, maybe at some point people were really excited about putting the technology at the forefront and then realized no one cares, and they put it on the back end. And I think we're kind of there now with NFTs too, but a lot of the best things will carry on, and I'm excited to see kind of how that works as we launch Best Dish Ever, and really, again, double down on this idea of community, and let, in this case, really, excited food fans come together to reach consensus, to vote on things, to unlock the network effects of going around to New York City's best restaurants. And I think a bunch of different companies now, Blackbird, you can look at them, like, all of these tech companies are now figuring out a way to use the tech in a way that doesn't scare anybody, doesn't make them wince, and doesn't make them back away. And probably because we're not calling them NFTs.
There we go. That's, I think that hits the nail on the head. So basically, I completely agree with you here. I think we are in this. I think that's. I forget exactly how you said it, but you're right. We're in this weird kind of like liminal space of, the technology just slowly starting to get abstract to the back end. Because this is something I've said before on the podcast, and I say to friends all the time, is it's just all infrastructure, right? But nobody goes around. If you think about the early internet as we know today, right? Nobody's talking about, I'm on this like HTTP, I'm on this this IP address, I'm using this router, and nobody cares, right? It's just like, what's the end experience? And so it's really refreshing to hear, and good to know that, I think, as you guys start to think about food, which is that's a giant industry in itself, right? That you guys are approaching it. And actually, just on the last episode, we just had Rap from Refraction, and we were talking about music and musicians and how they can get in space. And I think they're doing some interesting stuff. And then there are companies like Medallion FM, same thing. don't say the word NFT. Just, it's funny. I'm on my Instagram story, and I'm seeing, I'm seeing Jungle, for example, right? One of the leading musicians out there. Their fan club is off Medallion, which uses NFTs on the back end. And I'm always kind of promoting the fact that, guess what? You guys love Jungle, you love fan clubs. They're using blockchain and you don't even know it.
Yeah.
So I guess it's this Trojan horse that's coming, right? Yeah.
I think so. And I mean, again, it's like, what do you want to do with it, right? And I think that's the big thing that everyone's trying to figure out. Like, what parts need to be on chain? What parts need to have certain things, like you said, the infrastructure, where does it make sense to put it on the front or put it on the back?
Yeah.
And, it's a process.
Yeah. And it's funny. I'm going to say, I don't know. I guess there's a lot of on-chain maxes out there, and I don't think you nor I are those people, at the risk of upsetting some of those people.
No. And I mean,
have our fun. But,
I think that's the very interesting thing, though, about like, all right, how do you use Web3 tools and describe them in a way that appeals to Web2 people?
Yeah.
And sometimes that message is very clear to Web3 users because, we all understand and think probably the same way. And we're all paranoid and we all trust no one because we've been trained to trust no one. And then you talk to someone in Web2 and they're like, you're crazy. And, it's a tricky thing. And this, you're a marketing guru, if I may call you one. I think that it's very tricky to get these things right. And the messaging's not easy.
We're thinking about this very actively for some of the products we're building right now, with trying to build out for the mainstream, but thinking about crypto native audiences versus mainstream audiences. It's a very complicated task. I think companies like Blackbird and what you guys are doing with food and others are getting there. But yeah, there's a lot of work to do. Thinking bigger picture about media, right? And bring it back to just the overall topic of, on-chain, off-chain media, community-owned media, the list goes on. Curious to get your thoughts on the state of media in general. And what I mean by that more specifically is, as we all know, media is just historically in the past, because of digital, been just a really hard business. Curious to get your take on, where you think this is all headed, I guess, in terms of, what you guys are doing is really great, but do you really see, Bloomberg, for example, or CNBC or others becoming community-owned media outlets? Probably not.
Yeah.
So how can they continue to monetize? And maybe it's also, how can new media brands, or I don't know, right? So that it's a very interesting thought exercise, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I think, media has gone through different cycles, right? And the co-founder of Netflix is was one of our first mentors, still today, one of our most active kind of backers in what we're doing at Coinage. And I think it's interesting because if you think about even media back then and Blockbuster and Netflix and the business model, that was basically revolutionizing a business model is what that was, right? No one liked late fees. That was terrible incentives. You're mad at the company. No one liked Blockbuster late fees. And Netflix steps in and says, hey, you don't need to worry about those. And it was just a different model. And, I think in the evolution of the internet, you still have basically the same model that's existed for forever, which is, Web2 media says grow an audience as big as you can and sell ads against that audience and make your product worse. And, it works if you have a huge amount of people. But I think what's really interesting about creators now in this era of the internet is, Instagram and Twitter and YouTube created the ability for anyone to kind of just start from scratch and grow an audience themselves. And I think, we saw different businesses in the Web2 evolution pop up. Kickstarter, Patreon, different ways to monetize even a small following. And I think, everyone talks about the 1,000 fan theory and the idea of you don't need to be mass, you don't need mass appeal. You just need to kind of find your niche and your little fans and go from there. I think what's really cool about the co-ownership model is that you basically are able to tap into a shared passion from your fans. And if you lean into letting them steer the ship a little bit, you can unlock that passion and build more quickly. And so it's been pretty fascinating to see the way the Coinage has grown because we've scaled way quicker than if we had just kept it closed. And by letting people who are already interested in what we're covering have a voice, it's created the ability to grow way faster than we ever could. And I mentioned the validator deal, the only reason we got that was because one of our network holders said, hey, this is an opportunity. You should chase it because he had a vested interest, right? It helps everyone because we're all co-owners of Coinage together. And so I think, it's just, again, a different model. And I think it helps creators scale quicker. And it shouldn't be that surprising. I mean, Patreon's out there for a reason, but it's just another layer. Like Web3 creates co-ownership. You don't have that with Patreon. Dare I say, you might be a simp. You might be a simp if you're just subscribing passively and paying someone for their content. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but if you can pay someone and grow with them, if you can scale, because, you know, when you're contributing, you're helping them, but then why shouldn't you get a little benefit as you help that creator grow too? And that's essentially kind of what our model is. And I think it's cool to see the co-founder of Netflix say, hey, I think that's a really cool model and I want to support it too.
Hell yeah. And yeah, I think you guys are just ahead of the curve, because it totally makes sense, because I think as I'm thinking about this more, right, it's I think something like kind of like a thesis I've been thinking about is just like, it's just with infinite content, with infinite platforms and communities. Well, here's the thing: internet has connected more people than ever before. And now you are seeing almost this rise, this grassroots movement of these, you know, sub communities, right? And now these sub communities can gather, and like you're saying, Thousand True Fans, you know, you can monetize and build all these tiny little clusters, and that's fine and awesome, because now those clusters can be self-sustaining. So I guess it's media is headed in a world where you are going to have infinitely more groups and brands and outlets, and then it's a question of like, how do those things coordinate? And you know, that's where I guess something like Trustless Media comes in, because you can connect the different nodes within the network, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty interesting in the way that, you know, again, Netflix didn't start out being a huge streaming platform that was producing its own originals from day one, right? They sold DVDs in the mail. They shipped a DVD to your house. And so, like, you know, it takes time to build these things up. And for us at Trustless, starting with Coinage, now launching our second show, like, eventually, you know, this scales pretty well for that, right? Once you get up there and again, proving the model first, it's been really fascinating to think about even our subscription NFTs, right? Just to unlock our content up 185%. Like, to your question, I don't think the New York Times is going to go out there and maybe have their subscriptions freely trade on the open market. But if you could reinvent the New York Times today, would they? And I think that that's kind of, you know, an interesting concept for us to be the pioneers of. And to see it working in that regard is pretty cool. And it makes sense, because the value of our content, when we first started, we had one interview and it was free. You know, just mint an NFT and watch it. But now we've got a lot of interviews. We got a lot of content. We're award winning. And so the value of it has gone up. And so I think it's, again, I don't know if it's the best idea for everyone to do, but it does allow for some cool things to do on chain. And so
it creates a lot more opportunities for a lot more people. And I think you guys are doing it well. Thinking through, so I guess here's the thing. So how, as you guys are thinking about food and other industries, what do you think are some of the bigger gaps that aren't being addressed today, I guess, within the media space? Because it almost feels like there's traditional media and what they're doing, and we're over here. What's that middle ground? And what are the opportunities that you're seeing, I guess, whether it's verticals or industries or areas that haven't been tackled yet, or technologies and models? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that we're already seeing, even in Web 2, right there. I don't know if you know Angel Studios, but there's a whole idea of, you know, traditional media has been gate kept for forever, right? It's like there's a whole agent industry that, you know, you need to know an agent to pitch to Netflix. Like in Hollywood, we've seen some pretty terrible abuses of power. Like it's a bad thing, the way that it's built, right? And so what can you do when you really lean into, I think, crypto's core ethos, which is kind of decentralizing a lot of this power, like pooling resources together, crowdfunding essentially to create content that you want to see in the world. Like Angel Studios did that, and they're, you know, a group out of Utah, and they had a huge summer blockbuster, and it was really just a bunch of people who wanted to see that content come to fruition. And they're in the security space, so it's basically like, again, regulated crowdfunding for content. And what we're doing is pretty interesting. You ask about the technology because it lets people really lean into, again, the network effects of influencing the content, because, you know, you can invest in something, but this is attracting a community that is living and breathing the content that we're putting out, right? You like crypto, so you read Coinage. And if you're reading crypto content, you probably know stuff about crypto. And so you probably have something to say. And so it's not just a passive, quote unquote, investor, right? It's like unlocking some of those network effects. And I think, you know, in the rest of media, I don't think you're ever going to change like what people are interested in. I don't think there's any change in the verticals, right?
Yeah.
Like food's always going to be cool. Sports is always going to be cool.
Yeah.
But like the way that you can start to add the technology to, I guess, again, unlock
Yeah.
some more intimate relationship that everyone's seeking in these verticals, like that becomes a pretty cool thing when you can put it on chain.
That's gonna be really exciting, and I can't even. My mind is like it's just like going 1,000 miles an hour because I think for each of these different passions, right? There's just so many more opportunities to create some really interesting kind of bespoke things, right? Whether it's food and you're going to go see your favorite restaurants or your chefs, and there's food reviews, which you may not necessarily have within crypto, or there's menswear or just fashion in general, and as you're saying, sports. There's so many like nuances. I
Yeah,
think
but that's another one. It's like with food reviews. It's like, why is it only the Michelin Guide? You know,
Yeah.
why? Like, who controls that, by the way? And like, oh, and so like, what can you do when you let everyone
Well,
kind of
Michelin
have a
does.
share?
They
Of
want
the
to sell you their tires, right? Because they want you to drive to those places. That's why they set it up.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's so
exactly.
random. That's the most
So
random thing to me.
so weird. People, that's one of my favorite fun facts. Sorry. Anyways, yeah. I love that. I love that. Okay, well, I think we can actually go straight into the next bit here, which is would love to have you talk a bit more about Coinage and what's coming up. So I guess what can people expect in 2024? What are the most exciting things that they should be keeping an eye out for? You tell me.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, we're leaning farther into our model. It's always been a bit of an experiment from the get-go is, okay, how can you build community on-chain to steer an outlet? And like I said, already the subscriptions are up pretty significantly from where we started. And, the other ownership tiers eventually getting there to start unlocking the dividends as we turn on kind of the co-op piece and the membership piece. I think that's pretty fascinating because at that point, I haven't seen very many NFT projects distribute dividends, so we might be the first. And so I think that's kind of an interesting piece that hasn't really happened in Web3 yet. So that'll be coming in terms of the membership components of what Coinage is all about. And then from a content piece, we just keep getting better and better guests the bigger we get, which I think is really cool. And again, as we scale our community, we have a lot of people focused on a lot of different stuff. And it makes my job way easier, but it also makes just, the ability to tell these stories, I think something that like can't really be done elsewhere. And I think, we've shown what we can do and it's just a small community. And now as we've scaled to over 6,500 NFT holders, I think it's pretty cool to now kind of have all of these doors opened.
Hell yeah. And actually that reminds me there's something else I want to ask, which is, as you're thinking about, scaling up the community and as we're starting to grow, right? Bringing a bit back into crypto and the state of the industry in general, within our space, we'd love to get a better understanding of, as you're talking to a lot of these big names and as you're talking to more members and you're someone who, in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, generally has a pulse, right, on what are the narratives that are bubbling. So that's actually my question, which is really what are the narratives that you see starting to really maybe pick up steam, and what do you think are the things over the next year or two that you're really excited about and maybe haven't been told as well as they could be maybe?
It's weird, man. I think it's like crypto is very cyclical, as we all know. There's ups and there's downs, but there is a little bit more of like what's old is new again, right? In terms of everything back in the bear was really focused on L2s and the idea of scaling Ethereum, which is still probably pretty hot. But now the idea of like creating NFTs on Bitcoin ordinals and everything else that's scaling Bitcoin is pretty wild to think. Like we saw things move from one blockchain to the next, but like what's old is new again. And I feel like that's something that, we heard last cycle. A lot of people were like, oh, the biggest opportunity is DeFi on Bitcoin. But now it's actually happening. Whereas before it was just kind of like, I don't know what that means. So Stacks is huge. And we just had them on the show talking about that. And so I think, it's a weird what's old is new again chapter for crypto. And maybe I'm wrong because the pendulum will swing back now and then everything moves back to ETH. But I think it is, at least, and this is always like kind of the Ponzi-nomics of crypto, but like at least if more money is coming in, which we're seeing now with these ETFs, and what does that do to kind of the way that all of this works? I think it's pretty fascinating to watch the collision of everyone in crypto before was mostly just tech. Then there was finance. Now you've got this wave of creators trying to use the technology as well. And I just feel like we're at this really cool three-prong point where all of it's coming together at once in this cycle in ways that like weren't there in the last 2-3.
100%. And I think that actually ties into what you were talking earlier about kind of making things more accessible for people. Because I think like if we're talking, as exactly you're saying, tech, finance, and creative or creators, I mean, FriendTech is the perfect example of that, right? They kind of kicked that off with Privy, by the way, which, you know, you guys just mentioned, and Max and that whole team, they're great.
Yeah.
So I think they kicked it off in this idea of maybe, I guess, what we're calling now consumer crypto, which actually I'd love to get your hot take on, because it feels like consumer crypto is very interesting to me, because it feels like if there's a spectrum, right, of like full degen to, you know, your grandma who lives in, you know, Ohio who barely knows how to use Wi-Fi, you know, and there's a middle ground. Consumer crypto definitely leans a lot more crypto than it does consumer from what I've seen thus far, because there's always this level of maybe speculation and financialization that comes with it. So I don't know. It's just an open-ended like question of what do you think of all that, and broad more, I guess, more specifically tying into financialization of everything, right? Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is there no moral? I guess there's no real morals to it. Right? But,
we're operating in a moralist space. No,
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, it's funny because we had an episode kind of entirely dedicated to the financialization of everything, and is that good or is it bad?
Yeah.
And you know, I think there is kind of some weird dystopian thing to, should I bet on my friend becoming, you know, growing their following in that sense, and that's kind of, you know, what FriendTech was all about, I guess, right? And, you know, I think that consumer crypto is an interesting, even quagmire, because like, how do you, like you said before, how do you tell those narratives, and how do you appeal to one without telling them why it's cool? Right? Like, I don't know. And maybe that's the takeaway, is that like something that's good doesn't matter if it's Web 2 or Web 3, because it's good. And so as long as you're doing a good job with whatever you're trying to do, which for us as a media company or a content company is just making really good content, I think that that's kind of the steering ship that all these projects need to remember, is like, if you just are starting to, and we're seeing it with points, if you're just trying to create these like mechanisms, right, that like just reiterate and try and encourage behavior, and you lose sight of like the actual product you're trying to put out. Yeah. Like you can fake that for a little bit, but I think eventually you're going to get found out. And so I think that that's kind of like an important lesson, and something that a lot of projects live and die by publicly. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, you can create all the incentives you want, but if your product's not good, it's probably not going to go anywhere. And so I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question on consumer crypto, but I do think it is pretty fascinating to kind of see.
I think that's a great take, right? Because I think, you know, just trying to like summarize that is the way I'm processing it and the way I'm thinking about that, based on exactly what you're saying, is there's this financialization of everything, and ultimately what we're doing, as you're saying, right? It can drive incentives and can drive engagement, but if the product isn't good, like you said, it's not going to work, right? And I think not bashing on FriendTech, but just objectively, if you look at their user metrics right now, you know, it's a classic kind of pump and dump, effectively, for many reasons, right? People forked it, and it's very easy to copy, and it's not a proprietary model. But there is this question of, do people really want to speculate on their friends, right? Which it sounds like the market has, if you believe in free market economics, they've effectively said no to this point. Now, I have heard like maybe they're coming out with a V2 or something, so I hope that works out. But it does feel like
I think it's a good example of like how much you want to lean into things being on chain, and like it's a very similar thing. Like when I saw it, I was like, well, that's not too dissimilar from what we're trying to do, right? We're putting together creators and IP and letting people kind of you use the word speculate. If you want to speculate, you can buy an NFT, you can subscribe to the content, and then also co-own it. And so maybe there is a piece of speculation there, but it's more like actually growing, right? There were no other unlocks. I mean, I know you got like exclusive chats if you had keys on FriendTech, but
that wasn't the underlying motivation, right?
Yeah, well, I feel like the network effect piece is really where this starts to get interesting. And like we talked about food, and to your point, like it's basically allowing a community to come together to create those network effects, and then leverage them to everyone's benefit in the way of like, okay, we've now established, if you were actually creating like an on-chain Michelin guide.
Mm-hmm.
And, you created the network effects because the more people that were in there, the more prestige it had, the more like people were
Yeah.
talking about it. Like, you should return value to the people who were there to back you in the beginning. But
Yeah.
there is a product at the end of the day. It's not just pure speculation. You're
Yeah.
actually doing something together. And I feel like that's where, the collective co-ownership piece of DAOs have always kind of
Yeah.
struggled. If it's only speculation, it's again going to die. But if you're actually doing something, which
Yeah.
is where, I think Friendtech, it was cool to see, honestly, like people experimenting in Web3 is why I'm in it. And then you iterate and you say, why didn't that work? And I'm sure someone will figure it out.
Thinking out loud, right? Kind of almost treating this like a jam session, because I think it's something we're thinking about, as I said, like for our own products and what we're building is I think it really comes down to like, what's the underlying motivation for the end user, right? Like if it's overly driven by financialization, it's not going to work. But if it is, if like, as you said, there's something for people to do, there's a passion, there's a community, and there happens to be some kind of financial element, that can work. And that could be really interesting, right? So I guess it's, as most things in life, it's the middle ground somewhere, right? Of you can have these things, but it can't be the only thing for raising. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's I guess it's not some big revolutionary point, but that's kind of what most things are, right? You always end up right in the middle.
It's a point that we continue as an industry to learn over and over and over again, though, I guess, because, it's still, here we are. Well, how many years in, still talking about PFPs and, I don't know.
Well, it's hard when the entire industry, let's be frank, like we, what is it? Like during the bear market, we're all like builders in the bear. And that was great because, we're like, yes, like we're fellow builders and, the speculators left. But at heart, we're all driven by, a bit of speculation here. So it has been nice for the market to turn around a bit and be like, wow, okay, like my portfolio is not totally in the red. Like I'm green now. Like we're good,
Yeah, when you shed that anxiety, you can breathe a little bit easier. That stress is off your shoulders.
Yeah, exactly. But we're still trying to build quality stuff, and exactly, what you guys are doing with Coinage and community-owned media is so important, I think, and really excited to see it expand to food. Want to see how I can help you guys move into fashion and menswear. Maybe I might have to send this episode to Jeremy and be like, Jeremy, you want to talk to Zach and see what we can do. Like, I think that would be incredible.
It's something I know nothing about, so it is something that we would have to lean on either you or somebody else. But man, I think it's again, if you're changing the model, you can do it in any kind of vertical, any kind of niche, and so I think that's kind of the underlying thing of what we're working on, and it's cool to see it work, man.
And just to reiterate, right? I think thinking about from a like a community leader's perspective from Web 2, because I think I'm not sure if you get this question actually, but if you're talking to other people who are doing kind of similar things, you're trying to convince them, hey, this cooperative model, like what we're doing with Coinage is a better model than a Patreon. I think, as you said earlier, right? Like Patreon's just kind of that transition step to get to where you guys are, right? Of I pay that $5 a month for access to the Slack and exclusive episodes, but I get no upside on the podcast I listen to, which, and so I'm there, but as you're saying, we're just simping instead of this like kind of back and forth relationship of I can give and I can actually expect some kind of return outside of just the content. So it's pretty exciting. We got to figure out how to get there.
Again, it's just, it's been really cool to see that play out in practice, right? And like we had a lot of people who didn't think that would happen, right? They minted and they're like, okay, cool. I guess I'm a co-owner of a media outlet. That's cool, I guess. And then they're like, wait a minute, you should go on Coinage. And they like start pitching guests. Like they don't even realize it. Yes. They DM me and they're like, hey, this whole like aligned incentive NFT collective ownership thing, like I didn't think it was going to work, but it's weird how like incentivized I am to like help Coinage. And I'm like, I guess it's cool. I guess it works.
I love that. Yeah. That actually, just to show our own wares very quickly, that actually ties this idea called directed community that I wrote an article on this like a year ago. And this is the whole point, right? Is like when you align the community with the brand or the mission, there's a mutual, feedback loop. Like this is how it works. And so it's really awesome to hear that it's working for you guys. So really excited.
Web3 works, man. If we all just step back and think about it, it works.
And it does. Yeah. If you do it right without overly turning everything into a casino, right? It can work. I love it. And more on that to come. So really excited. Okay. So I think we're pretty much at the end of kind of the main section here. I think would love to get into the rapid fire questions. And so
Mm-hmm.
those are pretty straightforward. Ask questions, don't think too hard about them, come back to me, and then we can jump from there.
Okay.
So first one, we'd love to have you, and this is actually very relevant because you just did Best Crypto Project of the Year,
Mm-hmm.
but we'd love for you to have you pick one project, whether in Web3, AI, emerging tech as a whole, not including your own, that you're most bullish on. And that's a hard one, but it's okay. You can, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if this is because a lot of them were
Mm-hmm.
our first minters, but there are so many projects that I
Yeah.
really do respect in the Web3 space for them.
You can list a couple if you want. Just don't go listing like 100.
I'll list, I'll list two, but there are, I focus on real use cases in Web3. I think it's really cool when problems are getting solved. Thorchain's one of them. I think I've talked about it before, but the idea of a decentralized exchange that actually has a token that accrues value as more people are using the platform in a permissionless way. It's been really cool to see what they've been working on. So shout out to Thorchain. And then also Akash, and Render, this idea of okay, what is AI going to do? And it's so hot right now. The idea of decentralized cloud computing and GPUs and the race around that. We covered that in an episode for Coinage. And I feel no one knows where AI is going. No one knew where crypto was going 2 years ago. And now these worlds are merging. And it's really fascinating to start to see value accrual around decentralized computing power.
And it's such a good time. I mean, I will say, just on a personal note, I've been a bit, what's the word? Not buyer's remorse, but seller's remorse. Because those were two of my alt plays during the last cycle. And then when the whole market came crashing down, I just had to cash out of my alts.
Yeah.
And so in hindsight, you're you should just held them. But
Always in hindsight.
Always in hindsight, but we're doing all right. Otherwise, we kept buying other things in the bull. So, in the bear. So keep buy Bitcoin, buy ETH, and keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it.
That's right.
Anyway, not financial advice. Next question. Well, and this is one of my favorites. Biggest professional learning over the past 12 months.
Well, actually, it's kind of a good one. I think you just said buy Bitcoin, buy Ethereum, not financial advice. But I feel it's constantly, if you're being distracted by every new shiny object, it's easy to kind of forget, right? Kind of the big reasons of why we're here, which mostly is Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I think the biggest professional learning for me is really conviction bets, the idea of really doubling, tripling down on the things like you said, when sentiment turns, especially in crypto, it's pretty interesting. Sentiment really turns, and we've seen it on the ups and the downs. And I think professionally, it's kind of similar when you're working in this space. It's super easy to either get distracted by a shiny object and really, lean into it or not lean into it. But I feel being around really smart people in this industry, the really smart ones are smart about their conviction bets in I know this to be true, so I'm going to double and triple down on this one particular thing. And I feel for us, my professional sense of Web3 media, it's just all right, what am I convinced that we can do better than the old model, and leaning into those things. And I think, community is core to Web3 and what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
And so betting big on those things, betting big on delivering the benefits of community, that's our guiding North Star. And I think it's paid dividends, no pun intended, or will later this year. But that's kind of where we are at.
We love that. Yeah. And no, I mean, that's it. I don't know if I have any more reflections on that. I think that makes a lot of sense. Just having conviction, doubling down, focusing on, and I guess it's staying focused, right? Is that another element of what you're talking about here?
Yeah. I mean, I think again, obviously something new pops up all the time. And honestly, sometimes it pops up, dies, and then pops back up again. Right. And what's old is new, like I said. And so I don't know, there's a lot of distractions in this space if you're constantly chasing. And I think it's a problem. And I think, a lot of people do chase, and it's not always the best thing. You really got to stay committed to what are the bets you're making, and how do you double down on those if you're seeing any traction.
Yeah. It's that reminds me of there's I think on crypto Twitter, there's a guy, OX Gout or Gout, and he has actually it's on Warpcast, which for those who may not be aware who are listening, Warpcast, go check it out. Decentralized Twitter, basically. But he has a channel called Do Nothing Club, and it's exactly that, which is do nothing, and this is crypto specifically, right? This idea of Just buy ETH and do nothing. Just sit there, do nothing, and just like double down. Just like focus on the things that matter. So I love that, and especially in the world of business, right? And what you're trying to build, it's so important. Next one, and this one might be. I'm very curious to hear your answer on this one. But you have $1 million, or let's make it $10 million, whatever. The point is, you got a good amount of money that suddenly comes into your wallet or bank account, whichever one you prefer. Can't work on Coinage. What would you go build or work on today? And let's assume you can take some time off in between to go
get a recharge.
Recharge.
And I could use a vacation. I think
we all good.
See, today, I mean, I think everyone, and this is kind of what's happened, right? If you think about everyone in crypto shifting to AI, that was kind of the meme, right? But like, honestly, I feel like that's happened for a reason, because almost all that technology could be applied somehow, somewhere in like any other sector that hasn't been touched yet. So like, I might follow the crowd. My answer might be an easy cop-out answer, but it would probably be follow the crowd, chase into AI and do something there. But like, I don't know, every day something popping up in the way that technology is happening. I'd probably just make deepfakes all day, man, to be honest with you. I got $10 million. I'd live off that and just make deepfakes all day, every day.
There we go. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And actually, I just realized we didn't even talk about AI and media. So I don't know if we want to just a quick, pivot back into, the meat of it. But I mean, what's your general? I mean, we can start general. We can get more specific, right? But this idea of obviously AI. We recently saw Sora come out, right, which is text to video, and some of the videos that are coming out are insane. Right. So I think people have talked about the intersection of AI and blockchain, blockchain to verify, trustless ledger for content. That might be a space, but it doesn't even have to be about blockchain here. It's really just AI media. How are we going to deal with this, especially with the upcoming presidential elections, just unlimited content, video, text, photos? What the hell, man? How are we going to deal with this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there are exciting projects that are happening in that space to kind of build trust back in anything that you see on the internet, maybe being verified. And I think that that's obviously going to be more important as this becomes way easier to trick everybody. But even beyond that, I think on the flip side, just jobs. And like everyone always thought that it was like, oh, the creative jobs will be saved first from AI. It's going to be like, robots taking manufacturing. But it's actually kind of been the reverse, which is always kind of funny to think about, is that it's like, oh, wait, I'm a front end designer. Like now this can be whipped up by pushing a button. Like what's going to happen to me? And so, or copywriters, similar, ChatGPT. But I think, I think it's a tool, and I think everyone's trying to figure out how it can help their processes. And like technically in media, I think it'll help make things easier, but still need that human touch, at least right now. Is it weird to say that we still do? But I don't know, man. I think this year will be pretty interesting, the election cycle, seeing that all play out. But I think we'll figure it out.
It's going to get spicy. Let's just put it that way. We don't know exactly, but it'll get spicy. So we'll see. We'll see. Only time will tell. And actually, that's a perfect segue into our last question, which is, what are your craziest predictions for Web3, AI, emerging tech as a whole by end of year this year?
And
you've seen a lot of crazy stuff, and you report on a lot of crazy stuff. So I think you might actually have a good one. I don't know.
I don't want to say anything dumb, because I feel like everyone makes these really dumb predictions.
Well, it's all crazy predictions for a reason. So if you,
I know. All right. I think like we're already seeing the scams get way better, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll see like a huge like corporate level blunder now as like the technology gets good enough to where like someone's going to get caught flat-footed at a huge company is what my bet would be. Like,
in what sense? You mean like they'll get scams, or they'll be caught scamming? Or
I think they'll be scammed in a way that like, we all get tricked. And like, think about some of the old, like the Nigerian prince thing.
Yeah.
The buy a boss, the gift cards. Like I need the gift cards. Like people get scammed on those things all the time. How much, like what's going to happen when it's like, I saw a video of you say this thing and God. I don't know. I think on a corporate scale, I think that's going to be it's going to happen this year. That's my bold prediction, is that it will be a large dupe is what's going to happen.
That honestly doesn't feel that crazy to me. That feels very possible, which is, I don't know if that's depressing to say, but I could very much see that happening. So that one, maybe I'll write that one down and I'll be like, all right, when it does
Just
happen.
say paranoid is all you got to
Yeah.
just keep, that's true to our core.
We love it. We love it. Beautiful. Well, listen, I think that is it in terms of, the questions and all that. The way we love to end things always is give you a chance to kind of obviously show yourself, talk about Coinage, where can people find you? What's the thing that they should do if they want to get involved, and where can they find you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you said, you're one of our co-owners. Anyone can go to coinage.media to become a co-owner in the fastest growing Web3 media outlet. Help us steer the ship. You can also unlock all our content by minting an NFT, becoming a member that way. And then Trust Us Media. Best-ish Ever is launching in March. So we're going to be coming out with our own membership passes to unlock the network effects of building the best community and food on chain. And I think that that's going to be really fun too. But that would be my attempt to invite everyone into this new era of content online in the era of Web3. So that would be my sell, Blake.
Yes. And then by the way, when you do come out with the food, was it Food-ish is that what it's called? Or
Best-ish Ever.
Best-ish Ever. How are they going to be able to find that? On the Coinage Twitter, or where were you looking at?
It'll be bestishever.nyc is where you can go to sign up for all the announcements around that. But right now we're on Instagram. We're teasing a little bit of the content right now. We've been working with great creators who have like 1.5 million followers and former Top Chef finalists. I mean, It's really cool project right now.
I'm really excited. Well, there you go, folks. Lots of exciting stuff coming up for Coinage, Trust Us Media, and Best-ish Ever. So, thank you so much, Zach. This has been really fun, and I'm excited to see you again IRL very soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Blake. I appreciate it, man. And congrats to you and everything you've been working on, too.
We're doing our best. And want to shine light on folks like yourself. So, thanks so much, man. And I'll see you soon.
Right on, dude.
All right. Have a good one. Ciao, ciao. We hope you enjoyed that episode of Netcetera. If you'd like to support us, please subscribe, give us a like, and tune in anywhere you get your podcasts. Thank you so much.